providing assistance in many parts of the world. 2 years ago it was Somalia. Since last year it's been Syria. Palestine has always been ongoing. And as we wake up every day in the morning, as life continues, one of the first things that we do when we wake up in the morning is we pick up our phones. And unfortunately, this is the reality. And this is something that we all need to work on, where we should try to wake up remembering our Creator, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, one of the first things that we're taught when we wake up in the morning is to recite the dua, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For many of us, the reality is that when we wake up, we reach for our phone on the bedside, or we reach for the phone under our pillows. This is what 70-80% of us do, especially with the smartphones we have. We're checking how many messages we have, what's on in the news, the WhatsApp messages, and all of this. Whereas, unfortunately, the reality extends to the fact that when we wake up in the middle of the night, we're taught by the Salaf that when we wake up in the middle of the night, it's a time that, sometimes it's just, we might wake up to a drink of water. Sometimes you just wake up to turn sides. We don't know the time. The alarm clock for Fajr might not have got off. But it's a moment that we should remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a moment that we should make dua, because that time and that moment could be the time of acceptance. It could be the time of qiyam. It could be the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet narrates, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends and says, is there any servant of mine who is calling that I could answer his call? Whereas we could be utilizing that time and making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying some adhkar. Unfortunately, we pick up our phone and see what's going on. So this is something that we need to move away from. But as I picked up my phone today morning, I had received new pictures from Gaza. And unfortunately, as you may have heard today, Gaza has been flooded. And over 5,000 people have been affected. And it's our duty and responsibility to respond to the ummah. As the Prophet ﷺ reminds us that the ummah is like one body. The ummah is like one body. If any part of the ummah is in pain, then if any part of the body is in pain, the entire body feels the pain. If any part of the ummah is in pain, the entire ummah should feel the pain. And sometimes, even myself personally, as I fly to California, I actually flew to Germany, and then from Germany I flew to San Francisco. It was a 12.5-hour flight. The flight itself was 11.5 hours. It's a huge distance. From London, it's an 11-hour flight. And sometimes I feel that the fact that we're so far away, we are totally isolated. We're way away from the rest of the world. Sometimes when we travel, we go back and we realize that the fact that we're so far away, we ask ourselves, are we as far away from our Muslim ummah as well? And sometimes that's what it feels like. That we're just living in our society, we're just living in our bubble, and that's all that we're worried about. We're just worried about our jobs, our homes, our cars, and our children. And when we're talking about children, we're not talking about their Islamic well-being or their spiritual well-being. It's more about their material well-being. Are they doing good at school? Are they getting good grades? Not that isn't, fine. In fact, we should be worried about that. But there's a higher goal in life. And sometimes, I think this American life is so fast-paced. It's the American. It's what you call the American dream, and this is the reality. People have come to this country, and you either make it or you break it. But it's easier to achieve the American dream and reach your first million here than it is in most other Western countries across the globe. But sometimes it just makes us realize and put things into perspective. Why are we here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We have only been created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything that we do in life should rotate around this one verse. And we should ask ourselves, whatever we do in life, every step that we take, we ask ourselves, am I doing this following this command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it for some worldly gain? Is it for some material benefit? And we've all been created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then all of our acts of worship, everything that's been brought to us by our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, falls under this command of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and living our lives in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes we ask ourselves, the fact that we're so far away, it sometimes feel that we've distanced ourselves from the rest of humanity, from the rest of the Muslim community, from the rest of the world. And as I woke up and as I saw these pictures of young children in Gaza, just on a mattress in a school somewhere. Why? Because their homes have been flooded. I received pictures from Syria where it snowed this last week, and our Muslim brothers and sisters, our mothers, and the condition that they're living in, with absolutely nothing. And we ask ourselves, what are we doing? Are we just living in our bubble? Are we just worried about ourselves? Or are we really, truly responding to the ummah? Responding to the calls of our brothers and sisters across the globe, wherever they may be, in this country. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, Ar-Rahimun yarhamuhum ar-Rahman, yarhamu man fil ardi yarhamukum man fis sama. That the most merciful has mercy upon the inhabitants of this world. Have mercy upon the inhabitants of this world, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place His mercy upon you. And we ask ourselves, are we of those group of people? Do we want to be from this group of people who receive the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through showing kindness and mercy to the rest of humanity? And it's not about money, it's not about donating, it's not about, ask ourselves, how many times have we raised our hands and made dua for the ummah? Made dua for our Muslim brothers and sisters. Sometimes it's easier to write the check. It's easier to pull some money out from the wallet and give it when someone's asking. It's hard to wake up in the middle of the night. It's hard to dedicate some minutes, some portion of our time for the ummah. We're just living in this world where it's selfish. We're all selfish. We're just worried about ourselves. Nafsi, 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 as the Prophet ﷺ reminds us. And unfortunately, what's going to happen at that time is happening right now as well. We're just worried about ourselves. So as we grow together as a community, as we move together as a community, we should remember our responsibilities to the ummah. And we should always remember to help one another, to assist one another. And it's not about money, it's about time. If someone in the community needs our assistance, it's about taking that extra time, maybe going home late, helping them. Whatever it may be, they may be looking for something, they may be in need, they might, it might just be sitting down and listening to them, and talking to them, and finding out what problems they're facing. The extended community across the globe, wherever the ummah may be, it's our responsibility to assist them in any form, manner possible. And remember, although we say it's the least that we can do in making dua, it's the least that we can do in terms of effort. But when it comes to our spiritual sense, ad-du'a mukhul ibadah, ad-du'a silahul mu'min. The dua is a weapon of a believer. It's our responsibility to make dua for the ummah. Whenever we hear of something, unfortunately we live in media cycles. When the media pushes something to us, we remember. When the media moves away, we forget. But as an ummah, we cannot forget. They are our Muslim brothers and sisters. We need to make dua for them. And if we can assist them in any other way, form possible, we need to do that as well. But remember that the reason why we've been placed here is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And every move that we make in life should be in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not forgetting that we have been created, we have been sent to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from the Ibadur Rahman, those who are the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who spend their lives in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'd like to thank Dr. Jum'ah for putting me in this position. I'm not really worthy to speak, but Jazakumullahu khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our coming together. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep this love, affection, and bond within all of us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gather us together, inshaAllah, on the day of judgment, مع النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين, inshaAllah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of our coming, inshaAllah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.